So a little bit of breaking news, folks. So Kevin Keeley, who is a conservative Republican from California, said this morning that he will be breaking ranks with Donald Trump. And on Tuesday and Wednesday this week, he will be voting for the Epstein files to be released and full disclosure. It is likely that over 100 Republicans will be joining him to be voting for the full disclosure and opening of the Epstein files. This potentially is the biggest Republican vote against a president in recent memory. Folks, the source for this is CNN. My name is Nick. Let me know what you think about this in the comments.
So Donald Trump is now going after Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman out of Georgia. And I understand it. I've never really been a big fan of hers to begin with. I always thought she was somebody that was always trying to get a sound bite and just acted ridiculous sometimes on the House floor. This is kind of her style. But he's going after her now because she's been kind of saying some negative things about Donald Trump. And the Democrats don't do that. They don't ever do that. They don't ever go after each other and just have public disagreements with their party. They all kind of just toe the line. You know, you got Ben Shapiro, you've got Tucker Carlson at odds, then you got people in Congress that are at odds. And that's the problem I don't like about the Republican Party. I get it. There's always going to be difference of opinions with any political party you have, and that's great. That's good for discussion. But they like to air their dirty laundry out on the news and on TikTok and on Twitter and on all kinds of things. And I just think it's in poor taste because the Democrats don't do that at all. They always show a unified front. So I don't know, do they do it behind closed doors? Do they argue with each other behind closed doors, which is, it's like your parents. The best way to do is you don't argue in front of the kids, right? You go behind the door, you shut the door, then you have a discussion like adults. And that's what I think the Democrats do a lot better than the Republicans. Because right now, the Republicans seem very at odds with each other. And it's just not a very good look. Drop a comment below, let me know your thoughts. And join the conversation.
They're never going to release the files regardless of any vote in Congress. I've made another video called Checkmate on the Files that's pinned. You can go watch that for me to explain to you what they have done now to use the justice system to make it to where it doesn't matter if Congress votes to release the files. They have an open investigation, then DOJ won't release them. So we're never going to see what the DOJ has. So the only way for us to see the files is for the people who have parts of them to release them to the public now, because here's what's going to happen next. They're going to start sending search warrants, and the search warrants are going to say they want every copy of everything. So the search warrants are going to go out to the Epstein estate, to Michael Wolff, to anyone else that they think has any evidence, any kind of documentation, any kind of photos or videos of anything, and they're going to go try to take those things with search warrants. I'm speculating here, but I'm speculating based on almost 3 decades of work in criminal trial law and studying this regime. So anyone who has anything that the public should see, now's your chance. If you don't release it to us now, it's highly likely that the government's going to use the legal process to come and seize it from you, and then we never get to see it. So I highly encourage the Epstein estate, Michael Wolff. We know you have things. I am sure there are victims that have things that they could share if they're comfortable with that. Yeah. So that's the only way we're going to see it now, because Congress is going to have no power to release the files. Go love your neighbor.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is now comparing herself to the Epstein survivors. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, because she's getting a lot of threats now, and a lot of really bad things are happening to her since she's supporting the release of the files, and her and Trump are fighting. Her words, his paid internet trolls are endangering her life, and he is endangering her life. And now she knows what it's like to be an Epstein survivor. And of course, now that it's happening to her, it needs to stop. Even though this is the exact same thing she's done to countless numbers of people, and also supported Donald Trump for doing to countless numbers of people. But it's different now because she is the target. So it must stop. And while I appreciate the fact that she's finally doing something on her own instead of following the cult. You're not going to get any sympathy from me for any of that. That's not a thing. You're still Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you always will be. Thanks.
This is fascinating. So I'm going to bring this back to another area of policy. So stick with me on this. Trump says we need people from other countries. If we're going to do a lot of the stuff we want to do, we got to bring in smart, skilled people from other countries. Vivek Ramaswamy said basically the same thing. They went after him. Elon Musk has said we need more H-1B visa in the United States. Immigrants built America's tech sector. We should be importing the smartest people from around the world. MAGA hated it because it breaks the narrative. It sounds like big tech globalism, which they claim to be against. It acknowledges immigrants contribute something, even if they have white immigrants in mind, right? Like, let's be honest. But either way, they have to acknowledge, damn, immigrants do contribute here. And so when Trump says we need talent, it breaks the MAGA brain because MAGA, much of it wants a total immigration freeze. Trump wants labor that he can pay less. That's part of why Trump has an interest in this. Fox wants a culture war where immigrants are on the short end of the stick. Billionaires want engineers, including from countries where people aren't necessarily white, like India, as an example. So there's this massive disconnect.
It took less than a year of Donald Trump's second term before MAGA completely crumbled. And we all knew this was going to happen. We just didn't know when. This is a post from a very popular conservative creator on Twitter. Over 100,000 followers, with pictures of people burning their MAGA gear. What a sad ending to something we worked so hard for. Here's yet another former Trump supporter with over 300,000 followers on Twitter. And just like that, MAGA was done. Yet another creator with over 200,000 followers. I'm going to be on whatever side this isn't. In reference to Donald Trump having a hissy fit over Marjorie Taylor Greene. And there are so many other major creators all over social media turning on Donald Trump right now. What took them so long to realize that he is a terrible person, a terrible president? I don't know. And don't get me wrong, there are still people out there that still support Donald Trump, even after all of these emails got released. Wild, I know. But we are seeing for the first time MAGA truly crumbling right in front of our eyes.
Well, the war of words between Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene is really heating up and becoming potentially dangerous. Here is what Greene wrote on Twitter. I am now being contacted by private security firms with warnings for my safety, as a hotbed of threats against me are being fueled and egged on by the most powerful man in the world, the man I supported and helped get elected. Aggressive rhetoric attacking me has historically led to death threats and multiple convictions of men who are radicalized by the same type of rhetoric being directed at me right now, this time by the President of the United States. As a woman, I take threats from men seriously. I now have a small understanding of the fear and pressure the women who are victims of Jeffrey Epstein and his cabal must feel. As a Republican who overwhelmingly votes for President Trump's bills and agenda, his aggression against me, which also fuels the venomous nature of his radical internet trolls, many of whom are paid, this is completely shocking to everyone. My phone is blowing up with constant, amazing support. I'm so thankful. The political industrial complex and the toxic, violent nature of American politics must end. Our country is worth saving, and it can only be done if we pull together and save ourselves. Now, I'm glad that Marjorie Taylor Greene still has the courage to speak out against Donald Trump, and I'm glad she is starting to see Donald Trump for what he is. But she supported a man who routinely encourages violence against people. It's only now that that violent rhetoric is being directed at her that she sees the truth of what Donald Trump is.
Breaking news, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump have gone from a disagreement to a feud to a full-scale war. What? Yes, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the loyal Trump supporter, and Donald Trump are now at a full-scale war, and you know it's all over the Epstein files. So here is the latest. Marjorie Taylor Greene said that she fully supports the release of the Epstein files, that she supports the survivors telling of their story, and that she supports justice for the survivors. She can't understand why Donald Trump and anybody else wants to protect these wealthy men that did these terrible things to these teenage girls as teenagers. I wonder whose name Donald Trump knows might be in those files that he wouldn't want release, Marjorie. That may have something to do with it, darling. Might have just a touch to do with it. And clearly Donald Trump has struck back with her on Truth Social. He now has a new name for her. He doesn't call her Marjorie Taylor Greene. He now calls her Marjorie Taylor Brown. Because when green grass turns brown, it's rotten. I mean, really? Well, I can think who's rotten, Donald Trump. And I'm not a big fan of Marge, but I'm a fan of Marge here. And she does say the right things about a lot of other stuff lately. So maybe she has woken up a little bit. Maybe she got a little woke. But when we see these Epstein files, and we're going to see them, Donald, we're going to be woke the heck up for sure. And clearly there's a concern that many in the White House have about these files. I got to be careful. But, yeah, they're at full-scale war over it. The House of Representatives is tentatively scheduled to vote Tuesday on the discharge petition. It'll go from there. But clearly, there's a lot in these files, and who knows? Not to mention Bubba and Donica Lewinsky. Oh, my gosh. But Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump are currently at a full-scale war, and many other Republicans are breaking with Trump over this. Actually, they're breaking with Trump over a lot of things these days. Maybe they're beginning to wake up a little bit too. What do you think? Love you of my Democrats and my MAGAs, my crazies, my cuckoos, and my burned out light bulbs. But I love this disagreement. What do you think?
Okay, so let's break this down, because this move right here tells you everything about Donald Trump's mindset, and none of it screams confidence. So when a man who has built his entire political identity on tariffs suddenly snatches those same tariffs off the table overnight on beef, coffee, fruit, tea, cocoa, spices, bananas, everything, that is not strategy. That is fear. That's a man who just got punched in his mouth by voters and is scrambling to stop the bleeding. Now, Trump isn't doing this because he cares about grocery prices. He's doing it because Democrats just handed him 2 loud public losses in Virginia and New Jersey, states that Republicans thought that they had locked down, and voters told exit pollsters their number one stress point wasn't immigration, it wasn't crime, it wasn't culture wars, it was the cost of living. And what did voters say with their ballots? You are not helping us. So, what does Donald Trump do? He panics. He tears up his own playbook. He reverses himself on every issue he bragged made America strong. You don't drop tariffs that fast unless you feel pressure cooking on your back. This was not a thoughtful policy shift. It was a siren blaring in the Oval Office. Because politically, Trump just learned voters will punish him when their wallets feel empty. In those election results, big Democratic wins in red-leaning regions delivered that message loud and clear. And here's the real sign of panic. Trump didn't just remove tariffs on a few items, he yanked them off an entire grocery aisle. That's the kind of overcorrection leaders make when they see that their base is starting to drift and they're terrified of what comes next. He even rushed out new trade deals with Ecuador and Guatemala and El Salvador and Argentina, not because he suddenly loves Latin America trade, but because he needs cheaper products on shelves immediately to stop the political bleeding. And let's be honest, Trump built his brand on America First macho talk, but the minute voters put that heat on him, the tough guy persona folded like a lawn chair in the rain. Nothing says I'm nervous like abandoning your signature policy to win back suburban shoppers who are tired of paying $9 for a bag of coffee. This is survival mode. And when the president starts governing from fear instead of strength, you can start seeing it in every rushed, reactive decision. All this tells us one thing. Donald Trump ain't confident. He is cornered. And he knows that voters just showed him what they'll do when the economy hits their pockets. Now let me ask you this, family. If one off-year election scare can make Trump abandon his own economic philosophy, what do you think he'll do when Americans hold him accountable in 2026 and 2028?
Well, it's Saturday, and we had a late lunch, early dinner, whatever you want to call it. I'm finishing up some Christmas decorations. I made a ball wreath. These balls are like iridescent. They're super cool. Got them at the Hog Wild. let's see. It's been pretty quiet on the. There's no boats blowing up today or anything like that. But Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump are really going at it. It's been pretty intense between the two of them because she stands for the survivors, and he's like, he calls her disloyal. Which sucks because really this whole thing is about the survivors. Listen, I'm no fan of Trump's, but I want the cookie to crumble wherever it crumbles. Who's ever involved? There's a lot of names in those emails. There's not just Trump's name. There was Steve Bannon. There was Steve Bannon. His brother. Well, his brother and him were just fooling around. They mentioned Bill Clinton, Peter Thiel. So, Plantar, the Israeli prime ministers. There's a lot of names in those emails. I've yet to finish all of them, but they're pretty intense, and I just want it all to come out and to protect the survivors. They should be voting Tuesday or Wednesday on this. Johnson was going to make it a priority vote this week, so let's see what happens in the vote and how many Republicans break from Trump, because they say 10, they say 15, they say they're going to get 100 votes, throughout the whole thing. We're not going to know till they actually vote, so let's hold it off for that. What do you think? It's kind of funky. I can eat my bow and everything. How do you like that?
Matt Gaetz' trafficking victim was an unhoused 17-year-old high schooler who just wanted money for braces. Now she wants her story heard. Remember Matt Gaetz, the former GOP congressman who escaped trafficking charges despite a House report finding substantial evidence he paid for sex with a minor? Oh, and Trump's first choice to serve as attorney general before he withdrew. Yeah, that one. Well, now we know that his victim was just 17 and a high school junior when she met 35-year-old Gaetz in Florida. She was living in and out of a homeless shelter at the time. To save up her braces, she listed herself as 18 on a website for men looking to pay for companionship with young women. That's where she met Joel Greenberg, one of Gaetz' close friends, who later introduced the two at a party at the home of a former GOP rep in 2017. Court documents say the party involved alcohol, middle-aged men, and young attractive females. The girl said she was given drugs before Gaetz had sex with her twice that evening and sent her $400. It wasn't until several years later that she would be subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury to share her story, after Greenberg was caught in another crime. That investigation uncovered Greenberg and Gaetz' relationship to the teenager. Greenberg pleaded guilty to trafficking a minor and was sentenced to 11 years, but Gaetz wasn't charged. Now he hosts One American News Network. Gaetz' victim's lawyer, Laura Wolf, told The Times, "Power imbalances can be age, but they can also be financial. My client had little economic security, which allowed for financial leverage over her. Although my client's circumstances were revealed outside of her control, I hope it helps for the public to see a fuller and more human picture of her than the press has reported on to date."
The girls are fighting, and we're seeing it play out with the release of the Epstein file. So Trump and Putin have been friends for decades, right? Like friends, thick as thieves. Trump always supporting Putin, Putin always fluffing Trump back and forth. And this has been going on for years, even before the Republican Senate committee found out that Russia tried to help Trump win the 2016 election. And then when the Ukraine war started, Trump was always supporting Putin. He's a genius for doing this. He's not a bad guy. Ukraine should stop and give him what he wants. Like all these things, like always pro-Russia. And then that started to shift here in 2025. And I don't know what came first, the chicken or the Epstein, but you had Trump, who was trying to negotiate a peace deal and get himself the Nobel Peace Prize between Russia and Ukraine. And that was going back and forth pretty much all year, 2020. And Putin was laying back. They kept going back and forth about all these ceasefire deals. And then Putin would renege on it and then, do something else. Trump would get kind of mad, but then say like, hey, he should still be in the G7 summit. He's actually a good guy. And it kept going up until, I believe, August. And Trump was looking like a fool. Like Putin had been playing him like a fool like all year long and just backing off of all these peace talks. And then Trump started talking about giving patriots through NATO to Ukraine, which is a big deal for this conflict and something that Putin did not want. And so I think Trump was trying to strong arm Putin into ending it so he could get his Nobel Peace Prize and look like a hero and all these things. And Putin just wasn't going to do it. Like he's a narcissist too. He's like, I'm not going to lose. And so all that started to take place in August. And then suddenly, who comes up? Who enters the chat? Marjorie Taylor. And she comes forward with all the other people about the Epstein files, right? And now that we know some things, I wonder if Putin just unleashed her on Trump and said, hey, let's do the Epstein thing. Because he's not giving me what I want. He's not pro Russia enough. He's not pro Putin enough. And I need to put him in his. And when you look at all these things about how Marjorie Taylor Greene is on this recovery tour and she's suddenly a nice person and she cares about victims, and total bullshit. From 2022, she has been supporting Putin and his supports on Ukraine. She has been pushing Russian propaganda the entire time. And that's tabulated. Like we've got history of that all the way through. And then suddenly she becomes this big pro Epstein clarity person, even though she was one of only 20 House Republicans, along with Matt Gaetz, who voted against a bill to combat human trafficking. So think about that. So there's a couple things here. I think possibly Putin said, go ahead, MTG, go roll on Trump and help take him down because he's pissing me off. And make yourself look real good so that you can survive and I can use you later. Yeah, so I think you're seeing Putin cut ties with Trump over the whole Ukraine thing. And MTG is kind of like the source of his vengeance. And he's setting her up for later down the road. Like, people are going to start thinking she's sane, she can be worked with, all of these other things. She has never deviated from the Putin stance. She's never deviated from the Putin propaganda. And it could absolutely work out for Putin where she continues to be his tool all the way down the road as she runs for governor or senator or whatever she wants to do and continues to take marching orders from the Kremlin. So just something to think about. There's a lot more in here than just the fact that, you know, a bunch of rich, wealthy people and politicians are PDFs. There are international games at play over power, and I think we're seeing some of that play out with the tiff between Putin and Trump. All right, thanks.
To the surprise of literally no one, one thing that we are seeing with the release of all of these new Jeffrey Epstein emails that have been coming out this week, someone who was incredibly close to Jeffrey Epstein and in near constant contact and communication with Jeffrey Epstein up to a few months before Epstein's death, Steve Bannon, bathtub meth impresario and professional hobo Steve Bannon. Hundreds of texts and messages over almost a year show MAGA influencer Steve Bannon and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein workshopping legal and media strategies to protect Jeffrey Epstein from the legal and publicity quagmire that enveloped him in the last year of his life. Steve Bannon was advising Jeffrey Epstein on how to rehabilitate his reputation. The texts and messages released by the House Oversight Committee on Wednesday, Republicans, show that as early as June 2018, Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein were devising responses to the gathering storm of public outrage about Epstein's criminal history, his favorable treatment by the justice system, and his friendships with powerful figures in business, politics, and academia. Bannon conspiratorially described the renewed scrutiny of Epstein as a sophisticated op. And over time, Steve Bannon counseled Jeffrey Epstein in his adversarial responses to media outlets, the justice system, and his victims. So, of course, the two of the most disgusting men to ever live, Steve Bannon is a human boil. Two of the most disgusting men to ever coexist on planet Earth at the same time were buddies. It's unclear from these messages whether or not Jeffrey Epstein was paying Steve Bannon for Steve Bannon's assistance in rehabilitating Jeffrey Epstein's reputation in the year before he died, or whether or not Steve Bannon was just doing it for fun and just helping out an old friend, an old friend who had an island where powerful men could go and rape teenage girls. It's unclear whether Bannon was getting paid by Epstein or if Bannon was just doing it for fun to help out an old friend who had fallen on hard times. Of course these two were close.